Hi, I'm Kay Wells. Thank you so much for having me. Um, I will go ahead and start. So in 1938, here we go. In 1938, just 1 year after completing his landmark painting Guernica, Pablo Picasso created a tapestry model for the Parisian dealer and collector Marie Cottoli. Nearly 3 meters tall and 4.5 meters wide, this model, titled Les Femmes à la Toilette, shares many formal characteristics with Guernica: large scale, imagery of attenuated limbs and floating heads, irregular patches of brickwork and solid color, and a collage aesthetic that juxtaposes seemingly disparate materials within an extremely shallow perspectival space. Both works were made into tapestries after the Second World War. Jacqueline de la Baume d'Urbach, an independent weaver who had a small workshop, the Atelier K.L.H, in the south of France, wove the Guernica tapestry for Nelson Rockefeller in 1955. Les Femmes à la Toilette was never executed in tapestry for Cottoli, but was woven in 2 versions by the Manufacture des Gobelins beginning in 1966. Despite the similar moments of inception and shared formal characteristics of these 2 works, many art historians would see an enormous difference between their subsequent translations into tapestry. Placing great significance on the original intentions of the artist, they would distinguish between such works as Femme à la Toilette that Picasso designed for tapestry, and works like Guernica that Picasso only later agreed to have copied in tapestry. Yet tapestry's own system of production problematizes any such distinction. Tapestry producers have historically understood both types of works as equally authored by the artist and have given just as much weight to later decisions by artists or even the decisions of artists' heirs and collectors. Within the system of tapestry production, the artist is less a sole originator of unique objects than an authoritative yet often absent participant in the proliferation of multiples. Guernica became the first in a series of 18 tapestries reproducing Picasso paintings that Nelson Rockefeller, the American politician and noted collector of modern art, acquired between 1955 and 1975. Rockefeller's collection of Picasso tapestries shows that he was less concerned with verisimilitude or creating an exact replica of Picasso's paintings than with reproducing this more general category of a work of art by Picasso. That is, tapestry allowed Rockefeller to produce more Picassos for his collection, despite the fact that Picasso's personal involvement in the tapestry's production seems to have been minimal. Although Picasso approved of the final tapestries made by de la Baume d'Urbach, who was his friend and neighbor, these tapestries often looked quite different from the original paintings. The Guernica tapestry, for example, was woven in sepia tones of light brown, tan, and cream, in contrast to the painting, which was in shades of gray. Alfred Barr, the famous curator of the Museum of Modern Art in New York and a consultant for Rockefeller's collection, wrote to Nelly van Doesburg, who was de la Baume d'Urbach's dealer, to ask, quote, "We have seen the big tapestry of Guernica, but some of us are concerned about the color. Did Picasso actually decide upon the colors used? And if not, did he approve them? That is, was he satisfied after he saw the final tapestry? We need to know these details because we are sure that if we exhibit the tapestry, there will be a great many questions from people, some of whom will prefer the black and white color of the original." Van Doesburg replied, quote, "Dear Alfred, Picasso finds the tapestry a masterpiece. He finds the tapestry nearer to the colors of the original because the colors in the original are more or less gone. Before the tapestry left the Museum d'Antibes, where it was showed to the public for several weeks, Picasso wanted to be photographed in front of it," end quote. As this exchange shows, Van Doesburg and de la Baume d'Urbach repeatedly attributed control of the tapestry project to Picasso. For example, when Rockefeller first began commissioning tapestries in earnest in 1963, His curator sent a list of possible models to Van Doesburg and reported the results back to Rockefeller. Quote, Madame Van Doesburg has gotten together with Picasso on the subject of tapestries. He has chosen, from the list we sent, the Museum of Modern Art's painting The Studio to authorize for tapestry making. We had asked for prices of all the list, but Mr. Picasso has seemed to settle the whole thing, end quote. This initial authorization from Picasso was considered crucial to all the relevant parties before they would proceed to create a tapestry reproduction. For example, the director of the Tate Gallery gave his permission for 3 dancers to be translated into tapestry only, quote, after he had a paper signed by Picasso, which is not easy to obtain, end quote. Van Doesburg and de la Baume d'Urbach insisted that Picasso was actively involved in the tapestry projects, even though his only clear oversight role was in approving the finished results. In 1963, for example, Van Doesburg led Rockefeller's staff to believe that Picasso had personally selected the wool sample she had provided, when actually the ordering of wool seems to have been left entirely to de la Baume d'Urbach. Yet obtaining Picasso's final approval for each tapestry was just as essential for establishing his authorship as gaining the artist's initial permission to reproduce a specific work. And waiting for such final approval could significantly delay delivery of the tapestry to Rockefeller. Van Doesburg once had to explain, for example, about this work, quote, finally, the tapestry Les Danseuses arrived yesterday safely here. It took such a long time because Picasso was not able to see it earlier. Please excuse us, but the weavers do not like to press Picasso, which I understand quite well, end quote. In this and other letters and memoranda, Picasso appears as a respected and even feared figure whom Van Doesburg and de la Baume d'Urbach did not like to press and certainly would never contradict. The way Picasso functioned here as the ultimate or originating authority naturalizes his stature as the great artist and reflects the reality that the tapestries only had monetary value insofar as they could be considered his artworks. Recognizing this, Rockefeller wrote to de la Baume d'Urbach in 1970, quote, as you know, I have enjoyed so much the Picasso tapestries you have woven for me over the years. The other day, when I was showing them to my friend, he mentioned that the value of these works, besides their inherent beauty, rests in large part on the fact that Picasso himself has approved, altered, and corrected the cartoon and has sanctioned the final weaving when it came from the looms, end quote. Rockefeller then asked de la Baume d'Urbach to have Picasso sign an accompanying photograph of each tapestry, or more specifically, to sign the back of the photograph, which stated in Spanish, quote, the tapestry shown on the reverse was woven by the Atelier J de la Baume d'Urbach after a cartoon corrected and approved by me. On completion of the weaving, I also looked at the finished tapestry and approved its release for sale, end quote. These authenticating photographs secured the financial value of the tapestries by asserting the actions of correcting, approving, and looking as sufficient to compromise an artist's authorship. Although the language may still overstate Picasso's involvement, there is no evidence that he ever corrected any of de la Baume d'Urbach's cartoons, for example. It is guarded in comparison to Rockefeller's own fantasy that he and Picasso had been engaged in a personal collaboration to produce the tapestries, as when Rockefeller looked back fondly on this period as, quote, the 2 decades I was working with Picasso. In fact, the two never met and never corresponded directly. What Rockefeller's fantasy of his collaboration with Picasso suggests is that this was a medium in which the idea of the artist's authorship was more potent than its actuality. Because tapestry had long been a medium in which authorship was not attributed to the people who wove the work, but to those who designed it, tapestry lent itself to an increasing separation between conception and execution during the 1960s and 1970s, in which the artist could become more and more removed from his or her work's physical production. With the role of the artist limited to allowing an image to be used as a tapestry model and then approving the finished work, Reproductive tapestry approaches the production method of conceptual art. Indeed, we might consider the authenticating photographs that Picasso signed for Rockefeller as echoing the certificates of authenticity used by such artists as Dan Flavin and Sol LeWitt, in the sense that Picasso staked his claim to authoring works that he had conceived but not made by hand. And unfortunately, I don't have an image of these authenticating photographs, but I do have a copy of the contract that Picasso signed with de la Baume d'Urbach, which you see on the right. When Rockefeller sent de la Baume d'Urbach authenticating photographs for Picasso's signature, he de-emphasized her own role in producing the tapestries, and in essence asked the weaver to position a different artist as the work's primary author. Perhaps in recognition of this, de la Baume d'Urbach recommended that, quote, to be correct, the text should not read woven by the atelier J de la Baume d'Urbach, but rather that the tapestries, quote, were weaved without sewing by J de la Baume d'Urbach on her loom in her atelier. The weaver claimed that this would clarify the technical process by which the tapestries were made. They would now be weaved without sewing on a loom rather than simply woven. And that when she, quote, insists on these points, it is because Picasso himself gives great importance to the technique, end quote. However, this change in text also emphasized de la Baume d'Urbach's personal involvement in the tapestry's manufacture. They were no longer made in the workshop of the weaver, but by the weaver in her workshop. So the former suggests that any number of anonymous weavers might have had a hand in creating these tapestries, while the latter insists that a single master craftsperson is responsible for their fabrication. This was only one of the ways in which de la Baume d'Urbach asserted her autonomy and thus her significance in determining the finished appearance of the Picasso tapestries. The weaver did succeed in getting Picasso to sign these authenticating photographs, but when she sent them back to Rockefeller, she reminded her patron that Picasso had already signed the tapestries by having his signature woven into each one, together with the monogram for the Atelier K.L.H, and this dual signature is what you see on the left. This was a very long-standing tapestry convention, and it reinforced a sense of shared authorship. Tapestry weavers justified the presence of two authors by drawing on the model of translation. According to this model, the tapestry translates the painting into a new formal language or medium. The translation corresponds to the author's original writing, but is also the product of a new writer's expertise, namely familiarity with a second language and the skill of translation itself. De la Baume d'Urbach's position as an artistic translator was well established in the French sphere of tapestry production. She was somewhat unusual in having such a small workshop in which she executed nearly all of the work herself, and for being located away from the traditional centers of tapestry production. She and her husband, René d'Urbach, a sculptor who also designed stained glass windows and the occasional tapestry, lived and worked in a villa in K.L.H that belonged to their friend, the Cubist painter Albert Glez. Glez had invited the d'Urbachs to move from Paris to his house in the south of France when the couple married in 1949. At this time, de la Baume d'Urbach had just completed a tapestry weaving apprenticeship in Paris after studying sculpture for 3 years at the Académie Julienne. Her ability to retrain in tapestry weaving and establish a successful weaving enterprise in K.L.H speaks to how the post-war revival of French tapestry expanded the industry by bringing new weavers, artists, and dealers into the trade and extending production beyond the confines of Paris and Aubusson. Although de la Baume d'Urbach wove works of her own design, often with wool left over from other commissions, she was best known for weaving tapestries after designs by Cubist artists. Glez, as you see here, Jacques Villon, Fernand Léger, Sonia Delaunay, Auguste Urbain, and of course, Picasso. De la Baume d'Urbach participated in many group exhibitions and had numerous one-person shows of her reproductive tapestries, including at the Museo Picasso in Antibes in 1955, and the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris in 1959. These exhibitions celebrated her work as a translator or interpreter of great modernists, focusing on both her skill of execution and her sensitivity to the original model. They presented de la Baume d'Urbach as a named artist with unique talents, but nevertheless only exhibited the work she had made after or in imitation of that of other artists. In her correspondence with Rockefeller's curator, K.L.H, de la Baume d'Urbach repeatedly insisted that the tapestry should be a translation of Picasso's painting rather than a copy. For example, Rockefeller's curator, repeatedly and painstakingly diagrammed night fishing at Antibes in an effort to improve the accuracy of its tapestry reproduction. And I'm just showing you a couple of these very elaborate diagrams here. However, de la Baume d'Urbach rejected this model of reproduction entirely. She wrote, quote, "If the accords of color are to be respected when translating the painting material into the wool material, as well as the subtle modulations, we cannot copy the tricky brushwork. This error is banished since the renovation of French tapestry, and this is Picasso's firm will. Of course, you know that we work with his entire approval," end quote. So here, de la Baume d'Urbach called on two separate authorities to reinforce her position. The author Picasso, who the weaver implied did not want the tapestry to excessively imitate his painting, and the modern tapestry revival, whose rhetoric argued for the clear separation of tapestry and painting and rejected centuries of tapestry production as having too slavishly copied paintings on canvas. In comparing the two versions of night fishing at Antibes, we can see how the tapestry translates the painting into something quite different. The blended modulations in the green river at the bottom of the painting become distinct blocks of color that resemble patchwork. In the tapestry, colors at the top of the image have become brighter, the glow of the yellows, oranges, and reds burning with greater intensity. And Picasso's cubist-derived geometric shapes have become even crisper and blockier. De la Baume d'Urbach's technique of weaving without sewing interlocks the different colored sections together so that each shape has a jagged outline that forms a mortise and tenon-like joint with a jagged outline of the neighboring shape. While the painting still retains a sense of depth, particularly through the recession of the landscape behind the figure of the fisherman, the tapestry collapses space even more dramatically into a single plane. De la Baume d'Urbach has mapped Picasso's composition onto the fine grid of the tapestry's weave. If de la Baume d'Urbach were a contemporary artist, today's art world might be more inclined to view her subtly altered recreations of another artist's work as an appropriation project, a new expression with ironic or subversive possibilities. Yet whereas the avant-garde or critical value of more recent appropriation art is often contingent on the artist's opposition to that which she appropriates, the careers of de la Baume d'Urbach and other tapestry makers were predicated on willing collaboration with and personal approval from the artists whose work they reproduced. If de la Baume d'Urbach relied on Picasso and other cubists for designs that would get her tapestries exhibited and sold, Picasso willingly allowed de la Baume d'Urbach to produce and recirculate his work. Being a friend and colleague of Picasso provided de la Baume d'Urbach with a livelihood, but also with a high degree of independence and autonomy. As the sole executor of these tapestries, who commanded her own workshop, as well as Picasso's trust and respect, de la Baume d'Urbach was not answerable to a master weaver, a workshop owner, artist, or, as her correspondence with Rockefeller repeatedly makes clear, to a buyer. She wove these tapestries in the way that she saw fit and relied on Picasso to legitimate her work by approving the final result. And here you see images of one of these occasions when Picasso is being shown the final tapestry for his approval. Evidence suggests that Picasso never asked de la Baume d'Urbach to make changes, even when, according to experts like Alfred Barr, she strayed significantly from the artist's model. For example, Barr attacked de la Baume-d'Urbach's tapestry of Demoiselle d'Avignon, which Rockefeller acquired a copy of in 1962, as, quote, quite wrong, both in color and detail, and as a, quote, distortion or falsification of the original intention of Picasso's. But Picasso himself must have particularly admired the Demoiselle d'Avignon tapestry because he acquired one of the copies or exemplar for himself and hung it in the studio of La Californie in his villa in the south of France. Although Barr did not specify what areas he considered so objectionable, the Demoiselle d'Avignon tapestry departs from the color scheme of its painted model, just as the Guernica tapestry did. The figures in the Demoiselle tapestry have become paler, and areas of the painting that appear gray and light blue are rendered in the tapestry as pale blue and deep blue, respectively. Yet the tapestry also employs thicker contours and sharper contrasts that draw attention to areas of the work that are much less pronounced in the painting. Suddenly, the odd crescent shape of the hand that cradles the face of the squatting figure on the right stands out in very stark relief. The figure above her displays a raised forearm covered with a large patch of brown and pale squiggly lines, highlighting what seems to be a representation of underarm hair that rather blurs into the background of Picasso's painting. The faces of the tapestry's central figures feature wide almond-shaped eyes whose zigzag outlines give the women an almost crazed or manic appearance, quite unlike the far more limpid expressions these figures exhibit in the painting. Even the curtain on the left is given greater prominence. Its modulated brushworks turned into dashes and lines in high contrast shades that contribute to the more linear and fractured appearance of the tapestry as a whole. One could easily interpret these discrepancies as distortions or falsifications, just as Barr did. But one could also see the limitations of the tapestry medium, which turn curved lines into zigzags and blended brushstrokes into juxtapositions of contrasting tones, as enhancing the artificiality and constructed quality of Picasso's cubist space. Here, the labor of creating each pictorial convention is more obvious, and thus the conventionality of pictorialism is thrown into greater relief. Background details of the painting leap out in the tapestry, in part because the tapestry has no background. Each stitch exists on the same ground plane, and each is given equal weight. This draws greater attention to aspects of Picasso's work that Barr may have felt were better left understated. But it also shows how tapestry could further modernist ideas of abstraction. While de la Baume-d'Urbach may have let Rockefeller believe that Picasso had all of the ideas and that she faithfully executed them, in fact, the production of these tapestries relied on the intelligence and authorship of both of these artists. Thank you so much.